Something Wicked This Way Comes is a 1983 horror film directed by Jack Clayton, based on a novel by Ray Bradbury. It follows two young best friends, Will and Jim, in a close-knit Midwestern town. One night, Jim and Will discover a funfair has come to town. But where did this funfair come from? And how's the owner of it granting the townsfolk seemingly impossible wishes? Will and Jim are determined to uncover the sinister plans behind the fair and banish it from their town for good.
Excuse me, gentlemen. I'm a stranger in this town. Perhaps you could help me. My name is Dark. I'm looking for two young boys.
Town's full of them.
Yes, no doubt, sir, no doubt. But these boys in particular, they're two of a kind. Much of a height. One tow-headed, the other black as pitch. You could take them for blood brothers.
What have they done?
Done, sir? Why, nothing wrong, surely. Now, they're two lucky lads who won prizes at the carnival. I merely wish to give them the valuable rewards that they so richly deserve. Can you help me?
Okay, so what are my thoughts on Something Wicked This Way Comes? I want to start off by saying I thought this was an absolutely fantastic film, and I'm surprised that I'd never heard of it before. This is my first time watching it. I actually came across it on YouTube. I did look on Amazon UK for a decent physical release of it. The best I found was a Spanish import release, and I think I would rather wait until there's a better release. Hopefully at some point, maybe Arrow releases a special edition of it. I would definitely pick that up. One thing I wanted to mention before I go into why I like this film so much is I think a lot of people, when they watch this for the first time, will notice the striking resemblance it has to Needful Things, this Stephen King novel and the subsequent film adaptation of that. This film is like almost telling the exact same story in a way. It's got the same core premise of a mysterious stranger happens upon a small town and grants the townsfolk's wishes, and this is basically telling that same story. So I'm just wondering if Stephen King, I know he was inspired by Ray Bradbury. He's written that a lot, that he was inspired by him. Okay, so I'm going to now discuss what it is that I think made this film so good. First of all, I'll mention the main supporting character in the film. He is played by Jason Robards. Robards plays Charles Holloway, who is the father of Will Holloway, who is the main character in the film. Charles is an aging father. He's about 60 years old, and Will is about 10. So Charles has regrets, and he also feels like an inadequate father. He wishes he could do things that a younger father would do with a child. He wishes he could play baseball with them, just play sports with them, be more like an active father. But he can't because he's in his 60s and he's got heart problems and he can't do those things. There was also an incident that happened when Will was 4 years old, where they were at a family picnic and Will fell into a river. So Charles was apparently in shock and he couldn't jump in and save Will. He had to rely on Jim being the other child character in the film. He had to rely on Jim's father to jump in and save Will, and he's holding that regret the whole film. And the thing about that is it makes the character is a very multi-layered character. There's a lot going on, and Robards plays that character so well. You can just tell the way he carries himself, the way he walks, the way he talks. There's an intense regret inside him, and Robards brings that out so well. Actually, watching this makes me want to. I've seen a couple of Jason Robards films, like A Boy and His Dog and All the President's Men. but it doesn't make me want to go through his whole back catalogue and look at some films that I might find interesting. So I want to watch more of Jason Robards' films because he was just stand out in this. This is a really good film. He's probably the best part of it. And another thing I liked about it is the two main child actors seemed very genuine. Usually, sometimes they can be quite annoying. Not in this film. I think they did really well. The characters are really well written. They're best friends, and there is a genuine connection there. I think it was played really well. It was written really well, and it was played really well. That relationship, and the relationship between Will and his father Charles is also really well written and really well played. You can genuinely feel it. It feels authentic to the viewers that this is a real father-son, and the two main characters do feel really like they're Jim and Will feel like they're best friends. So that was really well written as well. And that's one thing I will say is the dialogue is really good, and the performances are really good. So the dialogue was obviously written by Ray Bradbury, and he'd been a writer for decades by this point. So Jonathan Pryce plays the villain in this film. He plays Mr. Dark, the owner of the funfair that's arrived in town. At first, I wasn't too sure about this villain. It did seem a bit cliched, a bit generic. It was the Mr. Dark character has a top hat, a beard, black suit, and he's got a posh English accent, and it seems like a generic choice for a villain. But I do think that as the film goes on, Pryce really gets into the character, and he really starts to grow as this character. There's one scene in particular where Will and Jim have just witnessed something sinister in the funfair, and Mr. Dark is tracking them down in the small town, basically trying to kidnap them. And Mr. Dark is questioning Charles about his son's whereabouts, and there's something about that scene where the tension builds a lot, and this villain becomes even creepier and creepier as this scene develops. Without getting into it, there's another scene where Charles is the local librarian, and there's a scene in the library at night. Basically, what Mr. Dark is doing is he's trying to get Charles to fold and give in to his temptations of being a younger father. And Charles doesn't want to give in to that temptation because he knows that if he accepts that wish, it'll have dark consequences, and there's a lot of tension in that scene, and Jonathan Pryce's performance in that scene is really well done. Pryce and Robards make that scene fantastic. So yeah, I did really like in the end I did really like the villain played by Jonathan Pryce. There's a secondary villain in the film played by Pam Grier. I think the character could have been more fleshed out. She's like a temptress who does some of the wishes. She casts some of the wishes, or casts some of the spells in the film. I do think she could have been fleshed out a little bit more to know exactly who the character was and where she came from and how she can cast these wishes. Maybe in the novel she's a more fleshed out character. There are a lot of green screen effects in this film. I think people might find they look dated by today's standards, but to me, I think they add to the charm of the film. It's similar to practical effects in 80s movies. They just add to the charm, and I really like that. It's what I like more than CGI. I just like sort of old school green screen effects, and there's a lot of them in this, and I like them. Okay, so I'm going to really talk about the thing which I think didn't work in the film, and I'm going to preface it by saying that there was a lot of reshoots. There was a lot of trouble between the studio and the director, Jack Clayton. He made a cut of the film, and apparently the audience didn't like it, so the studio ordered a lot more reshoots. They basically kicked Jack Clayton off the film, and they did some reshoots and cuts by themselves, and maybe that's why the ending doesn't quite work. I don't want to go into spoilers. It is an incoherent ending, I would say that, so it's pretty hard to describe what happens in the ending. I think, you can gather what would happen. This is a Walt Disney film. It's not going to be a horrific ending where the bad guy wins. But it was rushed. There's a good effect at the end. There was a really good practical effect at the end. But it was just rushed. It didn't feel coherent. It didn't feel that satisfying. The very end after the final battle, there's that satisfying note to the ending of that, but the ending as a whole doesn't feel satisfying. So yeah, apart from the ending, really, the film is excellent. I really enjoyed it. I was never bored by this film. I was never checking how long I had left. I was just enjoying the film. I was enjoying the characters, the dialogue, the setting. That's one good thing about the film is I really like the small town setting of this film. Yeah, and one thing I will say is this is a Walt Disney film. This isn't like a sort of violent, gory 80s slasher film. No, this is like this is sort of like it's sort of like an early prototype to Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark. It does feel kind of that way. It feels like R.L. Stine could have been inspired by this film in a way, because that's what I was thinking. I think definitely you could watch it with maybe there's a few images in the film which are quite gruesome, but so I don't think you could watch it with younger children, but maybe 10 years old and upwards would enjoy this film. Yeah, that's all I've got to say about this film. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I'd give it an 8 out of 10.